In case you haven't guessed, over the years, for those of you who know me and have heard sermons for a while, you know I have a great love for New York City, where I went to school and when I went to seminary to do my graduate study. A great love for that. Following our marriage, Pat and I lived in a married couples dormitory there, which was a great advantage while she paid all the bills. She was a nurse and she worked at a hospital. New York City is wonderful to me because it's a place of people. Vast numbers of people. There are people to meet everywhere. People from all over the world is the added benefit. I wish I knew how to speak all of the languages. Upon my arrival one time to visit our daughter Crystal, who is a nurse practitioner in the Bronx, after being picked up at the train station, we went off to City Island, a place I had never been before. A place of boat marinas, shops, and restaurants, and lots of people. After eating, we visited an oceanside beach where I fell to thinking about people again. The vast numbers of people who have sailed upon those ocean waters, including pirates and pilgrims and merchants and fishermen, privateers and buccaneers and vacationers on cruise ships, sailors on warships, and immigrants arriving from abroad. All fascinating people. My first full day in the city was walking the streets in the pouring rain amidst a sea of umbrellas. They sell them at all the stores when it starts to rain there, the little tiny ones. And then there were street performers to meet, and there were bus drivers and people in line at McDonald's and looking for some change, some homeless folks. A family who asked me for directions, someone who helped me to find the right subway station, someone who tried to sell me a watch I didn't need and did not buy, and sidewalk preachers preaching fire and brimstone. On an ambitious bike ride down on the second day alongside the Hudson River, we met a biker looking for directions and who told us a good portion of his life story. He is an artist in Greenwich Village and a fascinating person to meet, just one of many people. The biking on city streets was new to me, and the bike trails along the river were a first as well, but the greatest satisfaction for me were the people we met. The topic today is the people we meet. Who is the person sitting right next to you or near to you this morning? Have you met everyone who is here this morning, and do you know them really well? Probably not. You'd be quite unusual if you did or had. I have often said, what a mystery life is as we come to know one another quite well, and yet we never come to know one another completely. We learn about ourselves, and yet we never learn about ourselves fully. And as we meet one another in this physical and spiritual world, and learn to reach out to trust and to love and to create relationships. Even best friends, husbands and wives, parents and partners and children and neighbors and colleagues never finish getting to know each other. There's always more to meet in the other person. There's always more. If people are on your mind, if all people are trying for more, there always is more. So who really is the person sitting next to you or near to you this morning? You might begin with knowing that person's name, if you didn't know already. Then you might try to describe what you can see. How tall, what color are their eyes, what hairdo. But we all know that what we can see falls far short of knowing who someone is. A person is also a bundle of activities we cannot see with our eyes. There are thoughts and feelings and experiences. There's knowledge and there's wisdom and there's hopes and wishes. and faith in certain things that provide for that person a foundation upon which they are building their life. Setting all of that free is what I was thinking of when Bruce was singing the solo this morning. Jesus cleared the temple that we all might be made free. Each of you brings to every relationship you have a unique and personal world of experience. Each of you is a fascinating, wonder-filled person with unique abilities and possibilities. I find people to be fascinating and wonderful to meet, not because I agree with them all, that my opinions never are different from theirs, that their behavior never irritates, but I don't want to lose the relationships because people are fascinating. I suppose I'm one of them. You forget that. That's not boasting. That's just recognizing who you are. God says who you are. Those things simply aren't the criteria, though, that impress me with relationships, the things that we disagree about, although how interesting they are. What does impress me is God's word about who we are and what our relationships with others can be. Well, I believe that God has made it quite clear. And the scriptures are the basis for the thoughts. Genesis 1 says we are created in God's image, capable of thinking and communicating, giving and receiving love, and being the bearer of wisdom. Psalm 8 expresses awe that the Creator of the heavens and earth has a divine purpose for you and me, as small as we are, and the immensity of it all. And Luke 4, verses 5 through 8 reminds us of Jesus' own affirmation that our purpose in life is to worship, love, and serve God only. No other gods. And we also know from the many other teachings of Jesus that serving God goes hand in hand with serving people. Always the message is, go and do likewise. Getting to know them, taking risks to help them, encouraging them, supporting them materially and physically and spiritually, and sharing our faith with them. Which is something we don't always have the nerve to do. Not realizing how valuable that is. Given all of this, I believe that every one of us is a child of God's love and purpose because God says so. Here's a true story with a lesson. On the morning of July 4th in 1952, the California coast was shrouded in fog. Nevertheless, on Catalina Island, 34-year-old Florence Chadwick, perhaps you know the name, famed for previous swimming achievements, including swimming the English Channel in both directions. She waded into the very cold water with severely limited visibility due to the thick fog. On any other day, she would have surely accomplished her goal of swimming the 21 miles from that to the California coast, but this day, she conceded defeat and climbed into the boat, about 15 hours in the water. When the boat brought her ashore, she realized she had been less than a half a mile from the coast, and she said in an interview, "I'm not excusing myself, but if I could have seen the shore, I might have made it." Florence had failed to reach her goal that time, not due to the cold, but because of the fog. Fatigue and frustration and fear are three kinds of fog that often hinder us from seeing clearly our goals. When we make a decision of faith and give ourselves to the ways and spirit of Christ, those things of fog that threaten to dim our vision of what life is all for, to love and serve God and people we meet, where we should be going and what we should be doing, those kinds of fog lift rather quickly. And our purpose becomes clear and is in focus again. We are to value every person we meet as created in the image of God, as a child of God's love and purpose, whether they're on a path that pleases us or not. We are to value each person as a bundle of activities, abilities, and possibilities for the service of God's will and the service of others. Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician and physicist and religious philosopher, wrote the words, "Everyone has a God-shaped vacuum in their soul." That was Pascal's way of pointing us toward the truth, that what fits our life perfectly when we give ourselves to it is the presence, the love, spirit, and mission and purposes of God. That is very similar to what the Bible means by the image of God within us. That image of God is within every one of us here and waits for our acknowledgement of the very one who can perfectly fill it. Some will remember the famous words of St. Augustine, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in Thee." Things do not go well when we live against God's image of us. We all have inside ourselves a basic sense of right and wrong, just like a piece of wood that has a grain to it. When I worked for an antique dealer, he always said, "Sand in the direction of the grain, so you will not destroy the wood and its beauty." And so it is. Similarly, when you live against the grain of what God sees in you, God's image in you, life is not as happy as it can be. It is not as fulfilled as it can become. Your God-shaped vacuum can only be filled with God, and it happens when you choose Christ to be with you, forgive you, live with you, in you, clear the daily fogs of fatigue and frustration and fear and others that repeatedly accumulate and dim your vision for seeing every person you meet as a child of God deserving of your time, your attention, your interest, your forgiveness, and your love. God yearns for a relationship with all of us, longs to fill our empty places and our foggy places with God's Spirit and goodness. That is what can happen to us today as we say, "Yes, I'd like to be at the table of your communion. I really want to commune with your Spirit, to be filled with your Spirit. See your image within me grow a little, become a little, fulfilled." Let's pray. Oh God, we thank you if for any reason there are words of yours in these words, and help us to be inspired by that one Spirit that is you. We thank you for your presence always in our lives. We turn to that presence to be filled, and then to others as we meet the people in our lives. Amen.